London, Saturday, June 9th, 1889. Early morning. "Ah, right on time, gentlemen," Dr. Watson exclaims as we approach. "By the look of it, your visit to the Custom House was a success." Watson's face twists as if licking a fresh-cut lemon. "If I never visit the Custom House again, it'll be too soon. A lot of pompous all-to-do about nothing." He pauses, then holds up an envelope with a slight grin. "But crikey, I secured the release of Brockmeyer's wine import. Holmes will be quite pleased." We congratulate Watson on his political victory and walk west along the river, catching up with the doctor, whom we haven't seen in some weeks. It's easy to see why Holmes takes such a liking to John. A more agreeable chap in London doesn't exist. As we approach Billingsgate, a youngster hanging on the iron rail at the water's edge shouts out,
"The Rainbow Man is drowning! The Rainbow Man is drowning!"
"What a peculiar thing to say," Dr. Watson mumbles as we approach the lad. Following the boy's direction, we look to the Thames and see a slick on the water's surface comprising the most stunning array of colors. It indeed looks as if the most vivid rainbow has melted into the river. A moment later our awe turns to horror. A dozen yards downriver, at the end of the chromatic spill, a face-down body drifts in the current. "Good heavens!" cries Dr. Watson. Without a word, Wiggins throws off his coat and hat and climbs atop the metal rail, prepared to dive in. Just as he's about to launch himself into the Thames, the shriek of a police whistle rings out, then another, and another. Bobbies rush up at our sides, waving wildly to the police boat in the middle of the river. Dr. Watson grabs Higgins by the arm. "Hold on, man. Over there." He points to a flight of steps leading out onto a small stone jetty. If we can beat the current to it, we have a good chance of snatching the Rainbow Man from the water. Joined by the bobbies, we all race down the steps. The police boat intercepts the body a second before we arrive at the jetty's end. "Here, bring him here, old boy. I'm a doctor." The police boat immediately responds, mooring against the stone outcropping. Ever so gently, everyone passes the Rainbow Man between us until he finally comes to rest at our feet. It's an older gentleman of at least 60 years, but with thick, wild locks on the portions that remain. A heavy brow, large nose, and wildly long mutton chops that have the length to form a beard but don't unite over the chin or cover the upper lip. He's ice-cold and blue as the sky on a summer day, but he blinks and gags, regurgitating water as we lay him on his side. When we roll him onto his back, his fixated pupils fall directly to Wiggins. He tries to grab a hold of him, but he only has the strength to feebly thrust his right fist against Wiggins's chest. In a long, prolonged exhale, the man manages a single phrase, "Sous Tamise," then goes limp and lifeless. Looking to his stomach, Wiggins finds the stranger's fingers clenched around some sort of paper. Wiggins forces them open and withdraws a single calling card, held so tightly in the man's fist it remains unspoiled by the river. Dr. Watson pushes past Wiggins and grabs the Rainbow Man by his waist belt. Heaving the man up and down by the belt, Dr. Watson attempts to resuscitate him. Only after a minute of effort does Wiggins gently place a hand on Dr. Watson's shoulder. "Mate," he says softly, then points to the drowned man's head where a steady stream of red, finally recognized not as paint but as blood, spills from a gaping hole in the back of the man's head. "He's gone." The bobbies turn out the corpse's trouser pockets, revealing generic contents that offer no clue to the man's identity. Upon investigation, the inside of the man's vest explodes in colors. The source of the rainbow slick is discovered. Half-melted paint cakes, wrapped in gold foil and embossed with a large ox and the name Oxford. "No identification of any kind. Anyone recognize the poor old chap?" Everyone shakes his head or grunts in the negative. "Thanks for the help, gents," one of the officers says while holding his hand out back towards the street. "I'll have to get an inspector down here right away. Best you three move along." "Right, of course, Watson mumbles as we make our way back up the jetty. "I dare not interrupt Holmes in his current case. He's been at it for so long and it's given him such trouble." Wiggins nods. "Don't worry, Watson," he says, and then turns back to the bobbies. "Tell Inspector Cray that Holmes and his associates are on the case." "Case? What case?" the bobby barks, throwing his hands out to his side. "That hole in his head didn't get there all by itself. You've got a murder on your hands, man. We don't have much to go on at all, but tell Cray we won't rest until he's got the culprit behind bars." The front door to 221B Baker Street is uncharacteristically unlocked. After calling to Mrs. Hudson and then to Holmes, each with no answer, we rush upstairs to the office. Thoughts of foul play dance in our minds. A man of Holmes's reputation has a list of enemies longer than our arms. The office door is similarly unlocked. Not wasting a second, Wiggins throws it open and shouts, "Holmes!" Sherlock stands in the middle of the room, hovering over his desk, his back toward the door. Our abrupt entrance startles him erect, sending a splash of liquid from one beaker into a larger container. Immediately, Holmes whips around, his eyes 5 times bigger than normal behind thick industrial goggles. A heavy brown apron is lashed tight around the front of his body. Without hesitation, he throws himself through the air and lands atop the 2 of us, taking all 3 of us to the floor. We lay there low for a moment. Holmes looks up, perplexed. Potassium powder? Nitric acid? I was sure the sodium hydroxide would have a disruptive effect. My apologies, gentlemen. Holmes rises and helps us both to our feet. But the compounds I'm working with here are highly explosive. My accidental spill should have induced a most spectacular... Before Holmes finishes, we all turn to the desk where a plume of yellow smoke bursts up from the flask. After a tremendous roar, we all find ourselves on the floor again, this time thrown a good 3 meters from our last position. By luck and grace, we all escape serious injury. "I knew it," Holmes declares, jumping up with a slight wobble, most of his hair frozen straight back from the blast. We stand up, trying to get our bearings. "Gentlemen, I must get back to my experimentation at once. With regards to your latest case for Inspector Cray, I have a sneaking suspicion the murder is only a byproduct of a more elaborate crime. Keep in mind, clues are often open to interpretation. The successful detective knows not just the common meaning of a clue, but every possible meaning. And, gentlemen, next time you call, please do knock before entering." The door to 33 Victoria Embankment is unlocked, and we enter a quiet, desolate landscape of paintings and sculpture, most of which are far removed from our appreciation. We silently peruse the display of creative works, the soles of our shoes tapping against the polished marble floors and echoing throughout the gallery of artistic wares. We move through a number of rooms, each of varied size, seemingly showcasing a particular style or theme of art. Though Wiggins is sure the rooms are organized by far more pertinent details, we refer to them only by their most obvious superficial natures. The white statue room, the red painting room, the fine china room, etc. And in every case, Browning Fine Arts seems abandoned. At last, on the far side of a large room with many life-size statues of metal and stone, we spy a man hovering over a glass case, cleaning a 14-inch silver Gothic figurine with a white cloth. The man pauses, looking over his shoulder at us, then turns back around most abruptly. He says nothing as we near, working faster to complete his task, and replaces the art piece in the glass case before we arrive. Finally, just as he steps away, Wiggins clears his throat. The man finally turns and looks to us under a sweaty brow. Seeing us take notice of his manner, he dabs his forehead with a cloth, but still says nothing. "Would you be the proprietor of this fine establishment?" Wiggins inquires in his most professional voice. "I would. Silas Browning, purveyor and curator. Can I help you?" Passing over the Browning Fine Arts calling card procured from the corpse, Wiggins looks to the man with unwavering attention. "This card was found on the body of a man pulled out of the Thames earlier today. We were hoping we could ask you some questions in an attempt to learn about the man." "Oh, my. I'm afraid we're quite a popular store, and I don't know much of the clientele personally." Mr. Browning pauses, his eyes darting between us, then continues, "Are you gentlemen with the police?" "We're working to help the police. Our employer is one Sherlock Holmes." An audible gulp comes from Mr. Browning as he swallows hard, though his mouth remains closed. "Sherlock Holmes, the detective, but that chap only solves—" He hangs on the last words, staring at us until Mr. Wiggins jumps in. "Murders, Mr. Browning. I'm afraid the chap in the Thames was indeed a victim of foul play." Mr. Browning stumbles backwards in an overstated fashion. We both lunge forward, grabbing him as he falls into the arms of a large brass Greek statue behind him. His eyes flutter, and he looks about to pass out, then fixates his eyes upon us. I don't believe that. That poor soul, Percy Fortier. May he rest in peace." A most unexpected turn of events.
"Do you mean to tell us that you know who the victim is?"
"I knew this would end in disaster. I tried to tell him to go to the police right off, but he wouldn't listen. Stubborn old goat." Wiggins waves his hand downward.
"Hold on there, Governor. Would you mind starting at the beginning and telling us what you know?"
"I will tell you everything I know, which unfortunately will likely prove not enough. In any case, I surmised Percy's death because I have been helping him these last few days in a horrid crime, forgery of a great work of art." A confession this early in the case. Unheard of. Mr. Browning most nervously continues. You see, Percy came to me about a month back, frantic that someone had taken his lovely niece, Eleanor Fortier, and demanded Percy undertake forging some paintings of antiquity for some nefarious reason."
"Which painting would that be?"
"I'd most certainly tell you if I could, but I have no clue. Percy never divulged it, and I saw no reason to ask. My friend asked me for help, and seeing the circumstances, that is to say, what was at stake, there was simply no way I could refuse." Wiggins packs his pipe while looking to Mr. Browning from the corner of his eyes.
"And this kidnapper and blackmailer, did Mr. Fortier ever mention who he might be?"
"I'm afraid not, gentlemen. My hand was only to help my friend, primarily for support in this most trying time. But there was this one evening—" Mr. Browning turns away, struggling to find the nerve to tell the story in his mind. We step closer. "I can't say with certainty that it connects, but one evening a very strange man came into the gallery. He was quite tall, slim, with a drawn face. He wore a solid black suit and a grey bowler, and seemed more suited as a coroner than an art collector. In any case, he introduced himself as Solomon Garamond, and inquired how much it would be to have a piece delivered to 21 Commercial Street.
Wiggins lights his pipe and starts smoking like a small rail engine. "And this was odd in what way?"
"Not odd at all, other than the man's peculiar look and mysterious aura, but that's not why I bring it up. It was as this Garamond moved to depart that Percy entered from the west entrance. Catching just a glimpse of the man, Percy rushed to me, enraged and beside himself. He asked me questions about the man non-stop, at one point slamming his fist into my desk. Then he darted out, half crazed."
Wiping his sweaty forehead, Mr. Browning continues.
"I have no evidence to the fact, but it very much felt like that Garamond had something to do with the situation Percy was in. I'm sure of it."
As we contemplate Mr. Browning's words, two chaps in grey uniforms appear from nowhere and interrupt our discussion.
"Excuse me, Governor. We're delivering a Chinese vase to a Mrs. Miriam on Portland Street. Got a message just this morning that she had to go out of town, and we were to deliver it there to a Mr. Silas."
Mr. Browning produces a key ring with a large number of keys attached to it. He flips through them, struggling to identify each one as he passes.
"Taylor, Brinksworth, Worthington,"
he mumbles to himself as he goes before addressing us once more.
"Sorry, gentlemen, some of my higher-end clientele really do take advantage of me."
With a flash of recognition, he removes a key and passes it over to the delivery worker.
No, I'll not take any deliveries from Mrs. Miriam. I don't need the aggravation again. Here's the key to her back door. Go on and I'll meet you there."
The men take the key and depart. As they leave the room, Mr. Browning calls out,
"And gentlemen, you take full responsibility for that key. If it's not in my palm when I arrive on Portland Street, I'll have your jobs."
They nod and exit, leaving us once again alone with the curator of the gallery. Stepping around a voluptuous nude goddess statue in bronze, Wiggins takes a long moment surveying the area. "Thank you for your help, Mr. Browning. One last question, and then we'll leave you to your other business. Do you know of anyone else who might recently have had dealings with Mr. Fortier? Someone in the art world?"
Mr. Browning chuckles. "As you just saw, gentlemen, our line of business, that is to say, the creation and trade of fine art in this city, is somewhat exclusive."
"Excellent," chirps Wiggins. "Then the work before us will be no task at all."
"I'm afraid you misunderstand," smirks Mr. Browning. "We all know each other and depend on each other. Percy Fortier most certainly knew all my acquaintances in their entirety. It would be most impossible to provide you the list you request."
There's no point in knocking when we arrive at 100 George Street, a second-floor apartment in a brick townhome. Wiggins pulls out his trusty purse of picks, and in record time we enter Mr. Fortier's residence. Our arrival must have been particularly quiet, as upon our entrance we surprise a young man filling up a brown case with items from Percy's painting studio. He startles at seeing us, dropping a number of small paint cans that roll across the wood floor towards us. Wiggins steps on one of the errant cans, stopping it dead in its tracks. "And who might you be, lad?" In a flash, the man turns and races through an archway into an adjacent room. Wiggins points to the main entry hall and shouts, "Don't let him slip by!" before rushing after the bloke. By the time Wiggins gets to the next room, the chap is halfway out the window, holding his brown case and a large painting wrapped in maroon paper. "Don't make this hard on yourself, lad," Wiggins exclaims as he lunges for the intruder. To Wiggins's dismay, the lad abandons his brown bag and drops into the alley behind the house with painting in hand. A crash of rubbish bins and falling bottles rings out. Without hesitation, Wiggins squeezes out the window and gives chase. The young bloke is quite a few years younger than Wiggins and has a good jump on him. We dash to the end of the alley where, turning the corner at full speed, Wiggins slams right into a cook carrying a sack of potatoes. In a moment's time, all three of us lay on the ground, scrambling and slipping on a slick of smashed spuds. "Why, you dirty son of a—" The cook is understandably upset. Wiggins shakes the spuds from his head, quickly looking about us, but the alley splits into three, each showing no sign of our thief. In a rare display, Wiggins loses his calm, cool demeanor. He screams and kicks a nearby metal door. Though not helpful in stopping the thief, his passionate display of frustration convinces the cook to duck back into the side door to his restaurant and consider the potatoes a lost cause. Collecting our wits, we hastily return to Fortier's house. Percy's apartment is quite large, with more rooms than an older single man could make use of. All the rooms are modestly furnished, suggesting a man who, despite significant talent, amassed no great fortune in his life. The largest room of the home is Fortier's painting studio, where we interrupted the intruder earlier. Here we find a vast catalogue of paintings in various stages of storage, some resting quietly against the wall, others wrapped in paper, some in fine cloth, some set off by themselves, others stacked together 30 deep. We have no way of knowing the value of the paintings, but assuming even a minimal value of significance, Mr. Fortier was more well off than his home suggests. Of course, our trade is not financial assessment, but detection and crime-solving. In this regard, we find that although the paintings in the studio have not been ransacked, they have clearly been gone through in a most hasty fashion. Nothing remains neatly set. Stacks lay chaotic, with signs of a recent and thorough investigation by someone who did not wish to leave behind the appearance of a recent and thorough investigation. "The young don't have such a subtle hand," comments Wiggins as we investigate. "Someone else was here, I'm sure of it." Before we leave the painting studio, our attention falls to one of the walls, where a gallery of 5 paintings hang in a simple cross display. First, a summer landscape at dawn by itself on top. Then a row of 3 showing from left to right, Euston Street during a rainstorm, a small steamer on the Thames, and a cattle in a field. And finally, on the last row, a still life of roses in a vase. Nothing peculiar at first glance, but upon closer inspection we notice that the middle painting, the one with the steamer on the Thames, is covered with a dirty, dried liquid. A large splatter in the middle of the painting, then streams of dirty discoloration trailing down and spilling off the frame onto the wall itself. An overturned metal cup nearby on the floor appears to be the culprit. Wiggins holds the cup to his nose, runs his finger along the inside, then rubs his index finger and thumb together, checking the consistency. "Just water, I reckon. A brush-cleaning cup or such? Most peculiar." The home otherwise appears normal, with no signs of further investigation. Apparently, the thief didn't even bother searching an undergarment drawer that holds a sizable collection of pounds sterling in a leather wallet. In the living-room fireplace, strange gold wood catches Wiggins's eye. "Picture framing, if I'm right." He scratches it with his pocket-knife, inspecting the filings on the blade. "Crikey, I think it's real. Gold plate. This pile of combustibles must be worth a fortune." Tossing the wood fragment back into the fireplace, Wiggins mutters with a chuckle, "Maybe Fortier did have money to burn after all." In Mr. Fortier's reading room we again find nothing out of the ordinary, save a minor oddity. Atop an end table, a small handwritten day journal. All the most recent days are crudely torn out, the latest entry being 3 weeks prior to the day. Claude Elliot, 16 Grosvenor Place, 1 p.m. Finding nothing more of note, we depart Mr. Fortier's flat. As we close the door behind us, the door across the hall opens and an older woman exits, presenting a large book before her. "Oh,
"Pardon me, gentlemen. I was hoping to return Mr. Fortier's book to Edison."
Wiggins looks to the woman with his brow furrowed in curiosity. "Ma'am?" he asks, fishing for more information. The dowager bites. As Mr. Holmes always says, the guilty rarely talk, but give anyone else an opening to talk about themselves and they'll never shut up.
"Percy gave this to me yesterday afternoon. Asked me to return it to his assistant, Edison Blake, the next time I saw him. He was just in here not a moment ago. Did I somehow miss him?"
That explains our thief in plain clothes, taking no measures to conceal his identity, or why the front door wasn't forced. An assistant most certainly has his own key to the flat. When offered the book, we accept it with a smile and assure the missus we'll get it into the proper hands. For some reason, Wiggins doesn't have the heart to give her the bad news about her neighbour. She retreats back into her apartment with a smile. Returning to Fortier's apartment, Wiggins glances through the book. An academic volume on art history, of course. Nothing of interest until the last page, where a parchment slips free. A handwritten note reads, "Eleanor is doing very well. Keep to the schedule. 3 p.m. The King's Sword." Signed, B.S. In our line of business, timing and luck are everything. A young, attractive girl with blonde hair, bright blue eyes, and an even brighter smile answers at 233 Regent Street. "Eleanor Fortier?" Wiggins inquires.
"Judith,"
she replies, opening the door and stepping aside. "Elle's in the garden." She points to the wrought iron glass door at the end of the hall behind her. With a nod we enter and make our way into the garden, where an equally lovely young girl with brown hair and hazel eyes sits arranging freshly cut flowers into a bouquet. "Miss Fortier?" She turns to us and rises to her feet, dusting herself off as we remove our hats. "Has anyone been to see you?" The loveliness of her manner suddenly disappears.
"What do you mean, anyone? See me about what?"
Wiggins points back inside, where the other young girl stands watching from the glass door. "Perhaps we should go back inside and take a seat." Throwing her hands to her hips, Miss Fortier reveals a hot-headed stubbornness far beyond her youth.
"Not likely. Go on. Who are you? What is this about? Judith, who are these men?"
For some reason, delivering bad news to the young is always harder. Fumbling a bit for the right words, Wiggins continues, "Miss, I'm afraid your uncle, as we understand it, Mr. Percy Fortier, I'm afraid he's gone. Passed away this morning." We watch Miss Fortier's eyes widen and for a split second dance around the garden with a distinct look of uncertainty. Suddenly aware of our attention, she tucks her face into her hands and sobs uncontrollably.
"Oh, that old fool! He's gone and left me all alone."
A swift wind blows past us as Judith rushes to her friend's side, pulling her into her bosom. "I take it you have no other family?" Unwilling to relinquish her friend, speaking buried beneath Judith's breasts, Eleanor responds,
"None at all. Father died 2 years ago, and Mother left us for New York City the year before." "I know what you're thinking," Miss Fortier bursts out from her friend's grasp. "This is somehow connected to my uncle's foolish story of a kidnapping. You've obviously come from Scotland Yard or are working with the police. Well, I tell you that fool story has nothing to do with anything."
Her voice angry, all grief for her late uncle instantly vanishes. We look at each other, a bit perplexed, as she stomps towards us. The other young woman reaches out to stop her.
"Elle, don't."
Miss Fortier pulls free of her friend and continues with a scowl.
"There never was any kidnapping. It was all a stupid misunderstanding. I have a suitor at the University College, and Uncle Percy never would have approved."
"I know this is difficult news to receive, but in light of this information I have to ask, who is this man at the university you speak of?"
William Willard."
The hazel eyes now bloodshot, she turns back to her friend and they embrace again.
"Please, gentlemen, I think that's enough for now,"
Eleanor's young friend Judith pleads. We oblige her and depart, giving our condolences for Miss Fortier's loss. Exiting 233 Regent Street, Wiggins sets his hat atop his head and gives a heavy grunt. "Strange," he mutters. "She didn't ask us how Mr. Fortier died. Didn't seem interested in it.
Not in the slightest.
We knock repeatedly at 10 Hanover Street, looking about the windows of the home for any signs of life, but seeing none. Wiggins gives a couple of shouts, calling Browning's name. We are only met with peculiar looks by a chimney sweep standing in the doorway of the next house over. Seeing as no one is home, we decide to move elsewhere with our investigation. We return to the sidewalk just as the sweep comes from the adjacent house, nearly colliding with one another.
"Looking for Mr. Browning, are you?"
We nod.
"He tends to keep long hours over at his art shop. What's that address now?"
The sweep scratches his chin, setting a smudge of ash upon it.
33 Victoria Embankment. We know of it. We were just hoping to catch Mr. Browning at home. Do you work for him?"
The sweep nods. "Been cleaning his chimneys since I was a lad." Wiggins goes on to explain the nature of our investigation and, playing a hunch, takes it upon himself to describe Mr. Fortier in great detail. The sweep's eyes seem to light up. "Oh, now, wait a second. That little French painter chap sounds familiar." After a pause, the sweep snaps his fingers. "That's it. I've seen him here just a fortnight ago. I had to come back late in the morning to pick up some tools I left on a roof across the way." The sweep points to the other house adjacent to Browning's home. "I remember. I was having a smoke, looking at the street below, and I seen this Fortier bloke go up to the front door and stop and kind of walk in circles a bit, talking to himself. Seemed a bit not right in the head, if you know what I mean. Then he pauses and raises his arm as if to knock, but stops and instead puts his ear to the door. Now, I don't admit to being a peeping Tom or nothing, but in my line of work it's a bit of an occupational hazard, you see. So I glance over to the main window on the side of the house and see Mr. Browning, eating and laughing with some lovely little tart. Casual acquaintances, I'm sure. She was far too young for any kind of calling, if you get me." Wiggins steps back towards Browning's home, trying to recreate the tale in his mind's eye.
"And Mr. Fortier, what did he do then?"
"Well, to paint a fella, he goes and kind of climbs around the side of the building and peeks into one of the other windows. Gave him a good sight of Mr. Browning and his guest, I guess, 'cause he stumbled back just as he saw the Queen herself inside. Must have got frightened that Bobby would come up and see him snooping, 'cause after stumbling to collect himself, he practically ran off." Scratching his head and looking to Wiggins, the sweep's face twists in confusion. "Say, why would he have acted in that way? Was it his daughter in there with Mr. Browning? Or maybe my eyes were off and it was an older lady after all. His missus? I'm not one for gossip, but come on, chaps, the mystery is killing me." Wiggins shakes his head.
"Afraid we can't say any more, but your account is a great help to our investigation."
We thank the sweep by telling him to visit 221B Baker Street for a new client, and then depart. Commercial Street is cluttered with cabs. A line of them, sometimes 2 deep, stretches for the entire length of the street. The drivers stand about drinking, talking, tending to their horses and minor carriage repairs. Making our way through the busy collection of drivers, most of whom tip their hat or holler, "Governor," as we pass, we arrive at 19 Commercial Street, then proceed to the next building, which reads 23 Commercial Street. 21 Commercial Street doesn't seem to exist. For good measure, we inspect the other side of the street and again find no presence of a building 21. Not wanting the visit to be a total wash, we take to asking a handful of drivers about anyone named Solomon Garamond. The responses are almost all the same. "Sorry, Governor, don't know any Solomon." Finally, the last man we ask offers a piece of advice. "I'd look for a driver here named Abraham. That old-timer's been driving longer than any of us. If there's a Solomon among us, he'll know him." In a few moments' time, we intercept Mr. Abraham. A squat fellow, he's already 4 pints to the wind.
Solomon,
He mutters at our inquiry.
Tall fellow, bit off-looking, drawn face, dark clothes.
We nod in anticipation.
Doesn't fit the look of any lads I know.
He takes a long swig from a bottle.
Of course, I've known plenty of Solomons in my day, but there hasn't been a Solomon driver in these parts for quite some time.
We discuss the situation amongst ourselves for a moment, but Mr. Abraham sees fit to talk over us.
"Now, I know just about all the regulars on Commercial Street, and I don't know of any Solomon in residence either. Are you sure you gents have the right street?"
We thank the old driver for his time and head off, having gained nothing for our investigation. Convinced the last name in Fortier's day journal is of significance, we make our way to 16 Grosvenor Place. A parlour-maid answers the door, saying,
"Elliot residence. How can I help you?" "A word with Mr. Claude Elliot, love. It's about Percy Fortier.
The woman directs us into the foyer.
"This way, but I don't know if he's receiving guests this time."
We follow the missus through a house of considerable wealth. Rugs imported from India, fine china behind display glass, crystal chandeliers, and, of course, art pieces covering nearly every square inch of wall space. Upstairs we're led to a chamber where the missus ducks in momentarily, then opens the door and bids us enter. Before the door shuts, a raven-haired man verbally assaults us from across the room.
"Where is he, that charlatan Percy Fortier?"
"Well, Mr. Elliot, that's what we came to discuss." Stomping across the room with a large volume in his hand, Mr. Elliot slams the books closed before us and hurls it across the chamber, striking the bookcase on the far wall.
"When I pay top pound for a painting, I expect it to be delivered on time. I don't care for excuses. 3 months? Absurd! I'll be sure Fortier never works in this city again."
Wiggins takes out his pipe. "Well, Governor, I've got good news and bad news." The passion in Mr. Elliot's face wanes, leaving behind a single raised eyebrow and the heavy breathing of a long-time smoker.
"What's this now? Say, who are you, gentlemen?"
"We're confidants of one Sherlock Holmes. I'm afraid you'll never see whatever painting Mr. Fortier owed you, nor indeed will he ever work in London again. Mr. Fortier was found dead earlier today, pulled from the Thames, a case of murder." Turning abruptly, Elliot pulls an ivory tobacco case from his pocket. He methodically places a long, gold-foiled cigarette in his mouth, then presses the edge of his case, bringing forth a small gas flame.
"Scoundrel!" he cries. "Figures he'd weasel out of our agreement by getting himself killed. Murder, you say?"
We nod. "We do say." Taking a long drag on his cigarette while doing some sort of calculation on his fingers, Mr. Elliot continues.
"Indulge my morbid curiosity, if you will, gentlemen. How did he die, exactly?"
"Blow to the back of the head," Wiggins says bluntly.
"Robbery?"
"Unlikely." Mr. Elliot turns and hastily retreats behind a large leather-wrapped desk.
"God only knows what he was up to. These artist types are all driven by their carnal passions. Even a man of Percy's age acts more than he thinks."
With a shake of his head, the irate man falls into his leather chair.
"I have a mind to storm over to 10 Hanover Street this instant and give that charlatan a piece of my mind."
"Hanover Street? Charlatan? Who might that be?"
"Silas Browning, curator of Browning Fine Arts. Who else? It was on his recommendation that I commissioned Percy in the first place."
Leaning back and taking another considerable drag on his cigarette, Elliot shakes his head.
"I suppose not only am I out the money of my commission, the painting itself, but now I suspect I'll have to send something to the funeral, make a donation somewhere in his name. Fucking Fortier! I knew I should have gone with a German impressionist. They're holding far greater value these days, and German artists always meet their deadlines."
On Chapter Street, a small flight of stairs leads into a narrow tunnel that opens into a shared courtyard between 4 buildings. Number 22 is the building at the far side of the courtyard. Halfway through the courtyard, Wiggins stops and takes a good look at the lay of the land and holds up his hand. "Hang on there. I'm not up for another chase around London proper. Why not grab a tea and a copy of the Times?" He motions to a nook aside the main door of the first building, then points back to the street. "Up for a little hunting expedition?" Patience, you see, can be a most fruitful virtue in our line of work. We split up as Wiggins suggests, and surprisingly, not half an hour later, the thief from Fortier's home appears. He passes through the tunnel and approaches Wiggins, who rests against the stone column with his back towards the steps, drinking a cup of tea and reading the Times, as promised. Though he's just steps away, Edison is completely oblivious as we simultaneously move to block him from the front and the rear. "Have the time, old boy?" Wiggins asks, stepping before the young lad. Edison Blake looks to his watch, then without moving his head, slowly glances up to Wiggins. "Wonder what gave us away." He turns to run, but finds his escape route cut off by yours truly. "Edison Blake." Wiggins throws down the paper and rushes up behind the boy. "If you will, I'd rather not with the running and chasing again. And you don't look stupid enough for the fighting. Instead, let's go back up to your flat and have ourselves a nice, civilized conversation." Dropping his chin to his chest in shamed defeat, Mr. Blake leads the way. "Please don't kill me." We look to each other with raised brows at the genuine and depressing request. "Relax, lad. We're just here to talk." Inside Mr. Blake's flat, we set the nervous young man on a couch and take up a seat next to him. Trying to put him at ease, Wiggins strikes up his pipe. First things first, Mr. Blake. I believe you have something that doesn't belong to you. The boy gets up without a word and leans in behind the couch and wall, pulling out the very maroon paper-wrapped painting he nicked from Mr. Fortier's house. Or at least it looks exactly like it. With a sigh, the lad hands it over to us. Wiggins wastes no time tearing the paper away. At last we get to see what the fuss is all about, sniggers Wiggins. Beneath the covering we find a winter scene of a railway cutting through the Alps. Wiggins stares for a moment, then looks to the boy. Actually, it's mine, Mr. Blake says a bit nervously. I mean, it should be. Percy owes me about £14, the value of that Steinwell you're holding. He talked about giving it to me. Truth of it is, I think he was planning to pay me or give me the painting. I just figured I'd never see a shilling now. Leaning back in his chair and puffing a plume of thick white smoke, Wiggins looks to the boy, waiting for him to finish. Tell us, old man, how do you know Mr. Fortier is dead? Mr. Blake falls back onto the couch and drops his face into his left hand. It was God-awful. Unless the lad's a fantastic actor, he's spot-on genuine. Instantly we lean forward in our seats. You mean to say you saw it happen? Well, tell us, man. Still holding his face and looking down at the cheap, stained rug beneath us, Mr. Blake recalls the day prior. Mr. Fortier rang for me yesterday afternoon. He seemed a bit off and rushed. I asked him if everything was all right, but he just nodded and asked, well, no, now that I think of it, he really demanded, that I meet him at 11 p.m. outside the custom house along the water. The lad finally looks up, shaking his head. If I'd just been there on time. You see, I was a good 10 minutes late. I came running down from Water Lane, and as I approached, I caught sight of Mr. Fortier arguing with a man in a trench coat and a bowler. I can't recall what they said, but it was heated. I slowed my pace and watched as Mr. Fortier took to shouting in French, and then he hurled a painting off the walk into the river. I've never seen him so angered. The man in the bowler rushed to stop Percy, but was a second too late. In retaliation, he struck Mr. Fortier on the back of the head. With what? Wiggins asked excitedly. Couldn't tell, honest. I was 50 paces off, at least. Wiggins puffs his pipe, listening intently to the lad's story. Go on. Did Mr. Fortier struggle or try to retaliate? No, not at all, sir. The blow sent poor Mr. Fortier down like a sack of bricks. He fell right over the handrail of the walk into a small rowboat. I know that spot well, Wiggins interjects, his voice firm. That's a good 4-foot drop to the water. How could you have seen what Mr. Fortier fell into? The lad sits like a rock as he continues. Firstly, there was the sound of a thud, not a splash. At that particular moment, the whole place was silent as a church. Then there was the attacker. Right after Mr. Fortier fell, he climbed over the railing and struggled to untie a rope anchored to one of the pier posts. Finally, freeing the rope, he threw it out into the water. A moment later, I saw a small rowboat drifting out into the current, away from the walk. Mr. Fortier's fall must have been just enough to push it off. And you didn't shout for help or call for a policeman? I admit at first the shock of the whole ordeal had me petrified. But once I saw the boat go out and realized what had just happened, I started up again and was about to race right up and dive into the Thames after Percy. Mr. Fortier was a good man. He didn't deserve that. I don't care what anyone says. Rising to his feet, Wiggins turns his back, throws his hands into his vest pockets while smoking away. But you didn't, lad. Something happened. How'd you know, sir? Just as I set off, the attacker turned and looked right at me. Must have heard my footsteps rushing on. I was right under a streetlight when he looked, too. Saw me full and clear. I paused only for a second, but long enough to see him reach into his vest and catch a glimmer of something silver. I swear it was a pistol. Thought for sure I'd get shot in the back running off, but that's exactly what I did. My legs were going even before I knew it. That's what happened, sirs. Honest. And this attacker in the trench coat and bowler hat, what can you tell us of him? Nothing at all, I'm afraid, sirs. I only knew it was Mr. Fortier because of the time and place, the painting, and his general build and appearance. I was too far off in the night to see either of the men in any detail. And not knowing who we were, you figured we were accomplices of the killer, come to do in the only witness. The lad nods. Wiggins tamps out his pipe and motions to the door. Okay, lad, if it's as you say, you very well might be in danger. Get to a safe place and don't surface till you see in the Times that the crime has been solved. Do you have a place? No, but I can make a quick visit to 10 Hanover Street. Mr. Browning was a long-time friend of Mr. Percy. He's always been good to me, invited me to his farm in the country a number of times. Wiggins scratches his chin, thinking the suggestion over. I think it's best if you steer clear of everyone you know. In fact, why don't you head over to 221B Baker Street and explain the situation to Mr. Holmes? He'll have somewhere safe for you to hide out for a bit. The lad nods again, and we all move to exit the flat. And don't worry. We have an excellent average working with Mr. Sherlock Holmes. We'll wrap this case up and catch this scoundrel in no time.
It seems to us if they just demolished all of Whitechapel and put up a giant farm, at least 50% of London's crime would vanish overnight. Once again, we find ourselves in the seediest part of East London, this time 44 Ensign Street. The King's Sword smells of sick and urine. There are as many passed-out, inebriated blokes taking up space as there are chaps desperate to catch up. We walk to the bar and stand there waiting for the bartender, who loiters at the far end of the bar, apparently picking his fingers. Even though we're the only ones trying to buy a drink, he keeps us waiting. Finally, the middle-aged bloke with busted teeth and a pock-marked face wanders over with a sarcastically wide smile.
"All right, lads, what'll it be?"
Wiggins slaps 5 shillings on the bar beneath 2 fingers.
2 points and some information.
Of course, lads. Let me get the good glasses for a couple of fine quality men such as yourselves.
He comes up with 2 dirty pint glasses that look the same as every other dirty mug in the place. In his defense, he does give them an honest scrubbing with a bar rag. Most of the grime smears off. As he gets to filling them, Wiggins releases the coin.
"Looking for a chap that goes by the initials B.S.
The bartender rolls his eyes.
B.S.
He repeats over and over until the drinks are full. Pushing them over to us, spilling a good part of the head onto the bar, he bites his lip.
"What's he look like, this B.S.?
Knowing it was coming, Wiggins takes a sip and leans on the bar while looking about at the characters of the King's Sword.
"Devilish, my good man, devilish."
"Sorry, lads,"
the bartender says, snapping his suspenders against his chest.
"I'd like to earn that tip, but B.S. doesn't ring any bells, especially any devilish B.S. I don't rightly like devilish fellows visiting my establishment. I'll get you change, lads."
Wiggins moves off, motioning towards the back of the bar.
"Keep it. Mind if we look around?"
With another sarcastic smile, as if getting the best of us, the bartender pockets the money and replies,
"Of course not. You're paying customers, ain't you?"
We walk around the premises perusing the occupants. We get a mixture of dirty looks and complete disregard.
"The description was a gamble, of course. Unfortunately for us, this whole lot looks devilish."
With nothing solid to go on, we work our way back to the entrance.
"A wild goose chase, it seems. Well, you can't get lucky if you don't at least try."
We set the remains of our drinks on a table and turn to the door when a gruff wheeze bursts out from behind us. We turn just in time to see a little disheveled old man wearing a ratty cap and reeking of whiskey sit down at the table. He helps himself to Wiggins's half-empty pipe.
"Luck's what you make of it, gents, and I think for the right price I can give you a nice spell of the luck you're looking for."
"We don't take kindly to being marked."
The old man lurches back, throwing out his hand in great offence.
"The name's Morven Reeves, and you can find me here most any night. If I steer you wrong, you're welcome to come back and have words with me."
The bartender looks at us from behind the bar while he pours another drink.
"You watch yourself, Morven. One of these days you're going to say the wrong thing to the wrong bloke."
The bartender's agitation intrigues Wiggins. He sets 3 shillings on the table in front of Morven.
"Aye, I'll tell you. But if you like what I tell you, I'll get 3 more.
Wiggins nods and Morven continues.
"I know the fellow you want. His name is Bernard Shaw. I know he lives on Albany Street. Can't swear to the number."
Wiggins takes out his journal and records the name and address.
"How do you know he's the one we're looking for?"
"That Shaw is one hell of a cunt. Doesn't come in here often, but when he does, acts like he owns the place. Never meets the same person twice when he's here, and there's always something shifty. A quick pass of an envelope or package, an exchange of money. Once I seen him say but 3 words to a bloke, and the guy nodded, turned right around and left. I'm telling you, gents, Bernard Shaw is your man."
Wiggins drops 3 more shillings on the table, and we leave Mr. Reeves to the other half-empty pint. Once on the campus of University College, we stop the first student we see.
"Pardon us, lad, but do you know a professor here named William Willard?"
He thinks for a moment, then looks behind him and calls out to another group of students climbing a flight of steps.
"Jonathan,
Do you have a Mr. Willard for history? No, mate. Scotchman, the other lad hollers back. Sorry, chaps. Don't know him. On our way to the administration building, we ask a handful of other students, but none seem to recognize the name. Inside, we're met by a clerk who takes us straight off to see a Mr. Portroy, the university staff coordinator. A robust man with a thick black beard and a cup of piping hot tea in hand meets us at Mr. Portroy's office.
Tom Portroy, what can I help you two gentlemen with?
As we all step into the office, Mr. Portroy closes the door behind us and motions for us to sit down. His smile and mannerisms are genuinely warm and inviting, an unfortunate rarity in our line of work.
We're trying to find a professor here, or at least a professor we were told works here, though our initial sampling of the students on campus shines doubt.
Taking a big sip of tea, Mr. Portroy waves his hand for Wiggins to proceed.
Go on. Who is it you're looking for?
A Mr. William Willard.
Leaning back in his chair with a shrill squeal of grinding metal, Mr. Portroy smiles.
Ah, of course, William. Is this an academic calling or something personal?
Wiggins leans forward to make sure his voice doesn't carry.
I'm afraid it's a bit of official business, Governor. We're helping Mr. Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson with a police investigation.
The jovial mood suddenly vanishes from Mr. Portroy's face.
Nothing scandalous, I hope. The university has a reputation to uphold.
Murder, I'm afraid,
Wiggins says in nigh a whisper.
Murder?
Mr. Portroy blurts out, then, catching himself, leans forward to meet Wiggins at the middle of his desk, and in a much softer tone asks,
Murder, you say? And William's involved? No, I don't believe it. When did this crime take place?
The body was recovered this morning.
The life rushes back to Portroy's face. He takes another sip of tea and retreats back into his chair.
Thank heavens.
We look to each other, bewildered by his response.
William's not here, gentlemen. He's gone to teach abroad. So, there you have it. He couldn't have any part in a murder.
Wiggins leans back in his own chair.
He isn't a suspect, Mr. Portroy, but someone who is involved in the case, a young woman, said she's been seeing him for some time. We just wanted to corroborate her story. Can you tell us what day last week he departed?
Mr. Portroy turns in his chair and flips through a calendar hanging on the wall behind him.
Gentlemen, Mr. Willard hasn't been here for going on 9 weeks now. As I said, he left to teach abroad. We don't expect him back until next autumn, and that's if everything goes properly with his schedule, and I must confess that in education things rarely go properly to schedule.
We thank the coordinator for his time and depart the university with more questions than answers. The brass bell above the door dings twice as we enter 557 Baker Street. Rows and rows of every art supply imaginable stretch for as far as we can see. Wiggins picks up a roll of some sort of fuzzy cloth as we pass.
I never dreamed artists made use of such a wide selection of material.
Despite the small storefront entrance, Oxford's is deceptively large inside. Much of the wares lie strewn about. Rolls of canvas piled against a corner, pyramid stacks of paint tins one after another, before an entire 50-foot stretch of aisle dedicated to imported clays.
Rest assured there is a very precise method to the madness, gentlemen. Just let me know what you're looking for, and I'll bring you right to it.
A man sets a small tube of paste on a nearby shelf and shakes his right hand trying to free it from a large colorful feather. His work apron, covered in dried paints and glues, has a handful of similar feathers stuck to it.
Dyed ostrich feathers. Just come.
He reaches out to shake our hands in greeting.
Donald Oxford.
Wiggins plucks a feather from his hand and drops it onto the shelf next to the paste. Cutting right to the chase, he reveals one of Fortier's embossed paint cakes.
What can you tell us about this?
The middle-aged gentleman takes the briefest of looks, then hands it back.
Where did you get this?
The stamp clearly says Oxford. It's one of yours, is it not?
Mr. Oxford looks a bit flustered.
Of course it is. It's a very special paint composition, quite unique and quite pricey. I mixed it myself, but not for either of you gentlemen.
Wiggins returns the paint to his vest pocket.
We were hoping you could tell us the owner's identity. Unfortunately, we must be the bearers of bad news. The owner, an older man, almost bald but with heavy chops a hand in length, deep-set eyes, was found dead today in the Thames.
The news hits Mr. Oxford with a genuine show of shock and disbelief. His face and voice loses all strength.
Oh, good heavens, not Percy. Such talented men should be immortal.
Unfortunately, no man is immortal when it comes to murder.
Murder?
The owner of Oxford Art Supply perks up.
Who in the world would want to murder Percy Fortier?
Wiggins removes his notebook and takes to scribbling.
You knew this Mr. Fortier well?
With a nod, Mr. Oxford continues.
Of course, Percy good grief, was one of the best painters in London. Had he been a tad more ambitious in his early years, Fortier would be a name destined for the history books.
Is there anything you could tell us about him on a personal level? Did he have any enemies, owe any debts?
Mr. Fortier was a frequent visitor of the store and one of my best customers, but our friendship was a casual one. I'm afraid I can't offer any insight into what he may or may not have been up to outside these walls.
Wiggins presses his lips together and closes his journal.
What about this most recent paint you made for him? Why is it so unique and expensive, as you say?
He requested it, about 4 weeks ago. It was in quite a fit that he needed it immediately. When I say unique composition, I mean that quite literally. I've never produced such a paint for any of my clients before. Percy wanted a water-soluble paint that could build and spread with the appearance of oil.
A customer enters the store behind us, drawing Mr. Oxford's attention for a moment.
I'll be right with you, miss.
Plucking the last of the feathers from his apron and adjusting his hair, he continues.
Percy was a master at replication. He could reproduce the Mona Lisa, and anyone but an adept authenticator would be fooled. But I must confess I found his request for such a paint odd.
Why's that?
Wiggins perks up.
A water-soluble paint requires much more effort to stand the test of time. The paint I compose lends itself to correcting mistakes, easily wiping away an error or redoing an area without any added stress to the canvas.
And why exactly is that so odd?
Because, as I have said, Percy was an extraordinary talent. A talent like his makes no mistakes, even less so ever needs to correct them.
We thank Mr. Oxford for his information, then leave him to attend to his other customers. Outside of 77 Albany Street, we hear a loud phonograph crackling with a high-pitched tune neither of us recognize, along with the steady banging of a carpenter working within. We knock between bursts of hammer blows, but all our efforts go ignored. Trying the handle, Wiggins retrieves his black purse.
Locked, but not for long. Keep knocking while I work.
In a minute or two, Wiggins has the door open, and we enter amid a flurry of hammering. We follow the banging and the phonograph through an open set of double doors and into a large room flooded with bright beams of sunlight. An excessive amount of dust glitters in the light as it floats throughout the room. In the center of a chamber, an older man with thinning hair, glasses, and small eyes set a bit too close together stands hunched over a crate, hammering it shut. The container is about 3 feet high and similarly wide, but only 5 inches deep, just enough to contain 1 or 2 well-wrapped paintings, the likes of which we see stacked against every wall in the room. Upon noticing us, the old man startles, stepping back and raising a hammer over his head.
"Who the hell are you? What are you doing in my home?"
We immediately throw up our hands in a gesture of submission.
Easy there, old boy. We're here on official business, working with Inspector Cray and Sherlock Holmes, investigating a murder.
Still brandishing the hammer, the old man backs up, taking the crate in tow. He rests it against a similar crate already laid up against the wall and covers both with a grey woolen blanket.
"I don't care who you're with. Kindly leave now."
Wiggins draws back the sides of his jacket and thrusts his hand into his pants pocket. One of the rare opportunities of seeing him strong-arm a fellow.
Let's stop wasting time, shall we, Mr. Shaw? We're investigating the murder of Percy Fortier and have reason to believe you were involved.
"Preposterous!"
Shaw screams. His eyes quickly dart to a desk at the far side of the room. He continues,
"Gentlemen, I am the transporter of fine and legal antiquities."
Wiggins steps away, turning his back on Shaw, but secretly watching the old man's every move from the corner of his eye.
"But how did you know him?"
Walking towards the desk, Mr. Shaw stops in the middle of the room, pauses, then walks to exit the room.
"I most certainly did not. I never heard of him, and don't suspect that I should have. Now, I ask you again to leave immediately, else I shall call for the police and have them escort you out."
We walk over to the desk Mr. Shaw had looked at. With his attention turned to the hall, we surreptitiously open the main drawer of the desk, finding a well-polished silver pistol.
"Mr. Shaw, you wouldn't mind if we opened up some of these parcels, would you?"
asks Wiggins.
Of course I'd mind. You gentlemen have no right.
Wiggins fires both barrels.
We can always come back with the police and make it official.
Mr. Shaw's eyes narrow. For a moment it looks like Wiggins's bluff will get through, then the old man's face tightens up.
You do that, and I'll levy a lengthy report of this harassment. Gentlemen, I am known in my trade. I have transported invaluable art for some of the most prestigious organizations in the world. The material I'm currently preparing is part of a group of paintings going by rail for some extremely wealthy patrons. Every single piece is accounted for and insured by Tarkwell underwriters. I invite you to have a visit with that well-renowned insurance agency before you let another insulting accusation fly from your lips.
Mr. Shaw storms into the doorway, throws his back against one of the doors, and points into the hall with the head of the hammer.
Your next words are, "Good day," or I will go and fetch the nearest bobby myself.
We leave without saying a word. Stepping back into Albany Street, Wiggins shakes his head.
Agitated old man if I ever saw one.
The office of Tarkwell Underwriters is closed when we arrive at 32 Ivor Place. Large glass windows at street level leave no confusion on the matter. As we turn to leave, a woman walks up, extending a key to the door.
"Can I help you, gentlemen?" she asks as she unlocks the door.
We hope so, ma'am, if it's not an inconvenience.
"Margaret, please," she says, holding the door open as she looks back to us. "Inconvenience or not, it's my job. I've worked for Tarkwell for over a decade and pride myself on professional excellence. By the looks of you two, I'd guess some sort of business insurance?"
Wiggins smiles and lays out the details of our investigation leading to the art transporter, Mr. Bernard Shaw. When he reveals his possible connection to a crime at hand, we expect Margaret to recoil, perhaps refuse to help, but instead her eyes narrow with intrigue as she ushers us inside. The office is open and airy and feels more like a bank than an underwriting agency. After hanging her coat on a hook, she takes a seat behind a large oak desk and has us join her on the other side. "You see, gentlemen, fraud is a big concern in our line of work. To be frank, there's quite a bonus in it for anyone uncovering an underhanded plot. So, specifically, how can I help?"
"Thank you, ma'am. Well, you see, this Mr. Shaw, he was quite contrary when we spoke with him. It was his wish that we speak to someone here at Tarkwell and confirm the contents and nature of his shipment."
She nods and opens a drawer at the side of her desk.
"I know the account. A number of artworks of substantial value."
In a few moments she extracts a folder and rummages through a series of papers, reading them carefully as we look on with anticipation.
"Here you are."
She slides one of the papers across the desk.
"That's the official list of the paintings scheduled for transport by rail 2 days from now."
The list reads: 1. William Holman Hunt, The Hireling Shepherd. 2. James Archer, The Death of King Arthur. 3. Paul Cézanne, View of Auvers-sur-Oise. 4. John Everett Millais, Ophelia. 5. Edward Bourne-Jones, The Beguiling of Merlin. 6. John Everett Millais, Leisure Hours. 7. Thomas Eakins, A May Morning in the Park. 8. Edward Poynter, Catapulta. 9. Edward Poynter, Dia-de-Mune. 10. Jean-Jacques Henné, Solitude. 11. Pierre-Auguste Renoir, By the Water. 12. Daniel Turner, View of St. Paul's from the Thames. As we review the list, Margaret reads through the folder.
"This particular transport is a box underwriting."
Wiggins scratches his head.
"A box underwriting?"
Leaning back in her chair, she fidgets with the back of her hair as she explains.
"A box underwriting means the entire shipment is valued as a whole, averaged out without any distinct values to each piece. It makes our assessment and payout in case of any damage easier to process, and ultimately it means none of the pieces are of outstanding value. Although with a £12,000 policy, clearly the paintings are all quite valuable."
With Shaw's story confirmed, we thank the Tarkwell employee for her time and see ourselves out. Just before we exit, Wiggins calls back.
"Ma'am, how do you know the paintings are as listed?"
She looks up, a bit surprised at the question.
"Of course, we have an agent, an expert in art, inspect each of the paintings as they're loaded onto the rail. For a shipment of this value, Tarkwell Underwriters will of course keep a security officer in the car the entire trip. At the destination, the client is responsible for confirming receipt, at which point our firm has no further involvement." With a nod, we turn to leave.
Margaret rises from her desk and calls out one last time as she moves across the floor to a cabinet on the wall. Of course, with the recent theft of St. George and the Dragon, Scotland Yard will be present to inspect the shipment as well. They'll be inspecting all shipments of art leaving by rail for some time, until the painting is found, I gather.
A young officer takes us to Lestrade's office straight away. The inspector paces in front of his office window, his attention lost in a folder of papers.
"Ah, gents. Cray sent word you'd be coming by sooner or later."
"I'm afraid we don't have much to go on. We'd hoped maybe you boys in blue had something. Anything, really."
Lestrade grins like the cat that ate the canary.
"Would a proper identification do?"
Wiggins lurches forward, barely able to retain his excitement. A break in the case, indeed.
"Don't play with us, man. Who is he?"
Lestrade passes Wiggins the folder.
"Percy Fortier, of 100 George Street. One of my officers recognized the description as he had just come into the station a fortnight ago."
Rummaging through the papers, Wiggins mumbles.
"A fine art painter of considerable notoriety. Says here he's often hired by museums to reproduce famous works as decoys for high-risk environments. What was he in the station about?"
"Apparently he was completely beside himself. Kept going on about his niece, Eleanor Fortier, being kidnapped. The chap was so nervous and incoherent he stormed out of the station without making a full record."
"Right odd,"
Wiggins says, finishing with Fortier's dossier and handing it back to the inspector. Lestrade sits in his chair and tosses the folder on top of a larger pile.
"That's only half of it. When my men caught up with him at his flat, he recanted the whole thing. Insisted it was all a misunderstanding and practically threw my constables out on the street."
"Most peculiar. Well, thanks for the information. I'm sure it will prove most illuminating."
"Oi, one other thing," motions Lestrade as we move to leave. "It wasn't in the file, but about a month back some bloke named Oscar Babbage was caught breaking into Fortier's home. No previous criminal record. Another painter of some sort. Probably nothing to do with nothing, being so long back, but I thought I'd mention it."
We thank the inspector once again for his help and leave to continue our investigation with haste. Once again, we arrive at the medieval-inspired iron door that is the side entrance to the Bart's Hospital mortuary. Instead of knocking, Wiggins lights up his pipe. Surprisingly to most who aren't in the know, the old iron side entrance rarely stays shut for extended periods of time. Such is the case today, for before Wiggins finishes his bowl, the door opens and none other than Thomas Blood himself appears. Without missing a beat, Thomas throws a cigarette between his lips and leans over to Wiggins for a light. Wiggins obliges him without a word. After a long drag, the coroner exhales up towards the morning sky.
"Sorry, gents. If you're here for that painter bloke pulled out of the Thames, I don't have much to report. It's a pretty straightforward case."
"Cause of death?"
"Technically, exsanguination."
Wiggins shakes his head, prompting a quick correction by Mr. Blood.
"Blood loss, Mr. Wiggins. Most likely from that crack at the back of the head."
Another puff of his cigarette, he continues.
"I say technically because the lungs were so filled with water there was substantial swelling of the brain. He would not have survived even if the head wound had not proved fatal."
Putting out his pipe, Wiggins places his hands in his coat pockets and leans back, taking a long, deliberate account of the morning.
"The object that dealt the lethal blow?"
"Something heavy, irregularly shaped, yet fairly small."
Wiggins looks to Thomas.
"Small, you say?"
"Certainly. Anything of considerable size, say a large rail sledgehammer, swung with enough force to fracture the skull as such, would have delivered far more damage. As I said, not much I can tell you on this one, gents."
As we prepare to leave, Wiggins pauses one final time.
"The poor chap died in our arms, but can you tell when the attack was perpetrated?"
Thomas tosses down the remains of his cigarette and heads back inside.
"The head wound wasn't profuse in volume. It's most certainly the fact that it went unattended that led to Mr. Fortier's demise. A shame, really. I'd say roughly 10 hours, perhaps just after midnight."
Holding the door open, Thomas stops and looks back.
"Of course, a man can drown in a minute's time. The victim must have spent a considerable amount of time wounded, likely unconscious, before finding his way into the Thames. Bit of a puzzle, I guess. But then again, that's you chaps' expertise. My domain is the physical body, not the workings of plot and passion. That's far beyond my ability. Good luck, gents."
The National Portrait Gallery on St. Martin's Place is particularly busy when we arrive. We speak to the curator and are immediately escorted to a small back room where we meet the head of security, a tired-looking gentleman who appears more suited for matters of law than security.
Gentlemen, please give my apologies to Scotland Yard. I do plan on filing our formal account by the day's end. The gallery has simply been non-stop since the robbery.
Wiggins nods.
Understood, old boy. From what I understand, all of Scotland Yard is on top of it. Now, what can you tell us of the robbery?
With a sigh, the head of security continues.
Not much, I'm afraid. No one saw the theft.
Wiggins picks up a strangely crafted piece of glass off our host's desk.
And you can be sure it was stolen and not simply misplaced. I suspect a gallery such as the National Portrait has an overwhelming number of paintings to keep track of.
The head of security takes the glass piece out of Wiggins's hand and returns it neatly to his desk.
We're most certain it was stolen. If you please, that piece is a personal item of considerable value.
Our host takes a seat behind his desk and withdraws a small flask.
I hope you don't mind, gentlemen.
We both shake our heads to the contrary.
We know St. George was stolen because the copy is still on the gallery floor. On occasion we hang duplicates of valuable pieces. We do this for a variety of reasons, but the fact of the matter is the thief knew not to touch the painting on display and instead take the real thing packed in our storage room.
Then the thief didn't have to run the gauntlet of security measures on the gallery floor?
Our host takes a big swig, then shakes his head.
No, he may have well been 300 pounds overweight. This was not a crime of action. The heist was an exercise in superior mental planning. What he had, gentlemen, was a knowledge of our schedule and the process in order to know where the real painting would be. I must also confess that the doors between the outside and the storage room were all unlocked.
Wiggins shakes his head.
Then it seems, sir, your thief had that and more, either an accomplice in the gallery or a counterfeit key, but most certain of all, an eye for authentic art.
Our knock at 12 South Audley Street elicits the door opening but a crack. Light from the outside is just strong enough to reveal a single bloodshot eye staring at us from the darkness within.
"Well, what do you want?" "We're looking for an Oscar Babbage,"
Wiggins says plainly.
"How did you get this address? What do you want him for?"
"Are you Mr. Babbage?"
We wait a few seconds, but there is no response. The bloodshot eye simply lingers, slowly looking us over. A bit irritated at the silence, Wiggins continues.
"We were given this address by Scotland Yard. We'd like to talk to Mr. Babbage about the flat he broke into a while back, Mr. Percy Fortier's residence."
The eye widens momentarily, then the door shuts. We look to each other, wondering what to make of it, when the door opens. A middle-aged man, shirtless, with bloodshot eyes, messy hair, and in desperate need of a shave, hastens to tie the belt to his robe.
"The study is the second door to the left, gentlemen. If you'll give me a moment, I'll be right in."
We do as Mr. Babbage directs and enter the study, taking a seat on the available chairs. The room is a bit drafty and hasn't seen the touch of a maid in, well, forever by the looks of it. Quite a few paintings line the walls. It takes a second for us to realize they are perfect copies of the Mona Lisa, Monet's Impression, Sunrise, and William Turner's Whalers.
"Good God! These paintings! How could he?"
They can't be genuine, but our inspection shows nothing about them speaks to be counterfeit, although we are no art experts in any fashion. Mr. Babbage enters a minute later with his hair combed and his robe properly fitted. We take note that his hands are covered in splatters of paint.
"You're an artist as well?"
asks Wiggins.
He nods. "The competition, as it were."
"Come again?"
asks Wiggins.
"There's only one artist in all of London who can match my work."
He waves to the wall.
"That pompous old French bastard, Fortier."
Wiggins sits back down and begins packing his pipe.
"Is that why you broke into his flat? To steal his creations?"
Mr. Babbage flops down into a seat across from us and sighs.
"As I told the police, I didn't break into his studio. The door was unlocked, and I simply walked in. How was I to know he wasn't home? And no, I wasn't there to steal anything, except a glimmer. In our line of work, a glimmer can make or break a year or more."
Wiggins lights his pipe with a slight squint.
"And what's that supposed to mean? A glimmer?"
"There's not many people who hire replicators of our expertise, gentlemen. We work for the same clientele, you see. Often, in our trade, a retainer is paid out to begin a painting. The full sum is then delivered when the client is satisfied with the end result. I can't tell you how many times one of my clients pulled out of a commission because Fortier delivered sooner. He steals my clients right out from under me. I went to his flat, hoping for a glimmer of his latest work. I confess my intent was to repay him in kind.
With a few quick puffs, Wiggins gets the coals of his pipe red-hot.
"Afraid you'll not get the chance."
Wiggins looks to Mr. Babbage directly.
"Mr. Fortier is dead. Pulled out of the Thames this morning."
The news doesn't seem to shock Mr. Babbage. He takes a deep breath and falls back into his chair, sliding down so that his head rests somewhere in the middle of the chair. After a moment, a slight smile breaks across his face.
"It won't be the same without that arrogant old arse, but I'll be able to double my prices now."
Wiggins takes out his journal and pen, but instead of taking to it, he leans over and passes it to Mr. Babbage. Babbage takes it with a raised brow.
"You said you two had the same clients."
Babbage nods.
"Please give us a list of anyone you think or know had recent dealings with Mr. Fortier."
Tapping the pen on his chin, Mr. Babbage straightens up in his chair and rolls his eyes around in his head.
"We knew many of the same people, gentlemen, far too many to list, but I can give you 3 names. The most prolific, the most accomplished buyers that I know for a fact made purchases from both of us, Baxter Defoe, Jerome Arliss, and Theona Gibbons. I don't know Percy's business, but I speculate one of those 3 will certainly know something of it."
Outside One Horse Guards Avenue, a group of bobbies stands around chatting and blocking anyone from entering the home. Wiggins introduces us and informs the officers as to the nature of our call.
"Go on in, gents. I've seen you helping Lestrade on a case or 2. Word of advice, though, you might want to tread lightly. That Defoe character is in quite a way."
As we enter the home, Lestrade exits, practically bumping into us.
"What in the world did Holmes send you 2 for?"
Wiggins tries to peek around the inspector and get a good look at the man tramping around in the background.
"This Defoe character is a known acquaintance of our French painter, Fortier."
Lestrade tugs on his suit.
"Well, good luck, gents. Quite frankly, this was a total waste of my time."
"By the looks of the help outside, I think you were up to your armpits in murder."
Lestrade scoffs and shakes his head. He pushes past us with the tip of his hat, departing with his men. Inside we meet Defoe, an older, clean-cut gentleman with bloodshot eyes and a bit of dishevelled look about him. He paces nervously, mumbling to himself. His attention elsewhere, he doesn't even notice as we enter.
"Mr. Defoe, we're sorry to bother you at this time, but we'd like to ask you about Percy Fortier."
Defoe stops and looks at us, blinking repeatedly. "You mean you're not here about the paintings?" Wiggins looks around. The entire home is filled with paintings.
Which paintings would that be, sir?"
"Which paintings?" he asks. "Which paintings? The ruined ones, of course. Why else did I call the police?"
The chap rushes off and up a large curved flight of stairs. We hastily follow, nearly colliding when he stops abruptly halfway up and spins around towards the wall.
"Ruined!"
he cries, pointing to a painting of the Thames, doused with a red liquid. When Defoe turns and continues up the stairs, Wiggins touches his finger to the painting and then to his tongue.
"Burgundy."
We rush to follow the frantic man, who takes us to 5 other paintings in 4 other rooms. Each painting depicts the Thames in one way or another, and each lies covered with a good dousing of red wine.
"Are any of these damaged paintings pieces from Percy Fortier?"
The man falls into a chair and struggles to find a cigarette on his person.
"Fortier? No, these are all original pieces, not one under 30 years old, each of them quite valuable."
Wiggins looks around the room, casually eyeing the other pieces of art, all of which must add up to a considerable fortune.
"Was anything stolen, Mr. Defoe?"
"I've checked my safe. All my money is untouched, and no art is missing as best I can tell, though it may take some time to take a full inventory."
"Did you see who did it?"
Finally finding his cigarettes, Defoe places one in his mouth and then starts rummaging around his person for a box of matches.
"Of course not, gentlemen. As I told the police, I had just returned home, and as soon as I saw the damage, I called for them immediately. Now, if you'll leave me, I don't think I can manage any more questions."
Wiggins lights Mr. Defoe's cigarette, and we depart without pressing the matter further. We knock at 29 Gordon Square, another upscale home of one of Fortier's clients. As Wiggins gives the door a good rapping a second time, it comes unlatched and the door cracks open. Cautiously, we enter. The home of Mr. Arliss is quite lavish, having many furnishings and accoutrements of high value. Pure silver candelabra, gold-crowned railing on the stairs, and a jewel-encrusted great clock. As we enter the main foyer, Wiggins pauses, then suddenly rushes into an adjoining study, falling to his knees alongside a prone body. The man stirs as Wiggins gently takes him up in his arms.
What happened?
Steady there, old boy. Looks like you've taken a tumble. Give it a second. No need to rush.
Taking Wiggins's advice, the older gentleman with grey whiskers and thinning white hair slowly rises to his feet, where we carefully place him in a King Louis chair.
Would you happen to be Mr. Jerome Arliss?
Indeed. And whom do I have the pleasure?
Wiggins provides introductions and relays the nature of our investigation. At the mention of Fortier's demise, Arliss stops dead in his tracks and stares off at the wall as if in a trance. We look to each other, noting his most unusual reaction. Without preamble, Arliss gets up, walks over to the far wall, and falls against it with both hands outstretched. We rush to his side, thinking he's had another spell, but instead of falling, he leans in towards a painting of the Thames between his arms.
Great Scott, who could have done this?
We watch as he pulls a handkerchief from his coat and gently dabs a dripping liquid from the canvas. Closer inspection reveals the painting was not only doused with some liquid, but apparently the entire center of the painting was violently rubbed, smearing the paint beyond repair. We ask Mr. Arliss to take a quick assessment of his art, which he is eager to do. After waiting in the study for a quarter hour, we're informed that of the 30 or so paintings in his home, 3 are similarly drenched and defaced. Each damaged painting renders a depiction of the Thames. When pressed on Percy Fortier, Mr. Arliss recounts having lunch with Mr. Fortier last month. They spoke of art and a commission next year, but agreed to meet again later in the year to finalize the arrangement. Mr. Arliss doesn't seem to offer any information that might help our investigation. We arrive at the exclusive townhome of 14 Grosvenor Place, where the doorman escorts us up to Mrs. Gibbons's flat and rings her door. When no answer arrives, he apologizes and attempts to lead us out, but Wiggins affirms the nature of our visit and the imperative importance that we see Mrs. Gibbons at once. After a bit of convincing, the doorman acquiesces to using a skeleton key and granting us access to Mrs. Gibbons's home. Once inside, the doorman slips on a puddle in the marble entry, throwing his arms onto Wiggins to keep his balance. "What the devil! If Miss Theona steps in that spill, it could mean the—" The chap cuts himself off, staring at the body of one Theona Gibbons in the doorway of a nearby room. The puddle on the entry floor is a large pool of blood, originating from Mrs. Gibbons's head. We rush to her side, where Wiggins checks her pulse, but it's a foregone conclusion. The back of her head is smashed in something awful.
"Go for the constabulary at once,"
Wiggins demands, sending the doorman off in a blaze. Placing a nearby shawl over Mrs. Gibbons's body, Wiggins rises to his feet and heads off through the flat with intent and seeming familiarity.
"I think that's just about enough from this bloke. It's time we close the book on this one. Killing old Mr. Fortier in the Thames is one thing, but a defenceless woman, from behind, in such a violent manner, that just boils my blood."
In the study we find everything in order, and more than a dozen works of art on the walls.
"Just as I suspected,"
Wiggins declares.
"There, the Thames."
We look to a small painting of the Thames that has been thoroughly doused in an unknown liquid, a large volume by the looks of what's left behind on the stained wall and sopping wet carpet. A quick search of the entire flat before Bobby's arrive reveal only 2 other paintings vandalized. Both are paintings of the Thames River. After giving our account to the doorman, Wiggins calls out as we depart,
"Tell Lestrade the whole thing is a bit curious."
"What's that now, Governor?" The Bobby looks back, a bit confused.
"There's no forced entry or exit from any of the windows, and we had to be let in by the doorman through a locked front door. It would seem to me the murderer either knew Mrs. Gibbons or had a key."
A slim young man in a tailored suit answers our call at 14 Oxford Street. Wiggins quickly introduces us.
Any chance we could have a word with Dr. Black? We're investigating a murder for Mr. Sherlock Holmes, and we're hoping to gain his professional medical insight.
Throwing his hand up in irritation, the young man barks at us.
Ever since that blasted Times article, this door-knocker has rapped non-stop. My uncle is days away from retirement, his health is less than ideal, and he needs his rest. Please, find someone else to aid you in your investigation.
Acknowledging Dr. Black's aid was a long shot at best, we decide not to press the young lad and leave the doctor to himself. We enter the custom house through the rear, slipping past the massive stone pillars that seem more appropriate to some Roman Colosseum where men duel to the death, rather than the business affairs of modern-day London.
Blaine. Humphrey Blaine.
Wiggins blurts out, as if answering a question not yet asked.
If anyone knows of anything suspicious going on in the area, Blaine will.
Wiggins pauses as we enter the custom house's long room, a massive chamber that stretches the entire length of the building. Only a room of such size, with ceilings vaulted higher than most churches, could contain the enormous number of people present. We make our way, cutting through the lines of people representing every corner of the globe.
It's a long shot, but we're already here.
Taking advantage of all opportunities, leaving no stone unturned, Mr. Holmes's influence, no doubt. Pushing our way through a line of immigrants waiting on the passport office window, Wiggins shuffles up to one of the customs house tellers. He steps directly in front of a large man with long, thin whiskers and heavily leathered skin. A sailor from some unknown region of the Far East, one who, despite not speaking the Queen's English quickly, articulates quite clearly his disdain for being interrupted.
Isn't this Humphrey Blaine's station, my good man?
Behind the counter, the older gentleman with a lazy left eye half-heartedly looks up from his paperwork to Wiggins.
Duty record room, second floor.
Wiggins sets off with a wave of his hand.
I know the way. Thank you, old boy.
Again into the crowd we proceed, making our way to the main staircase. Atop sturdy old English oak steps, streams of people ascend and descend simultaneously like the circulatory system of some great creature. On the second floor we enter a grand hall, flooded with light from floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Thames. Wiggins leads the way to the duty records room, where we find the same scene from the long room a moment ago, only on a smaller scale. Wiggins paces the room looking for a familiar face, until at last a young man with chestnut hair and a bow tie waves from behind a glass partition. Hastily approaching him, we exchange pleasantries, and Wiggins quickly catches the custom house officer up on the scene outside on the river.
Dreadful. Right outside, in front of the custom house in broad daylight?
Wiggins nods.
Is there anything local, any trouble or troublemakers going on recently?
Wiggins' contact contemplates the question for a moment, rubbing his chin, then looks to both of us with sincerity in his eyes.
Gentlemen, I'm sorry, but with the exception of this affair you've just now brought to my attention, the custom house has been quiet. I haven't heard of any suspicious characters or rumors. I can't even recall any belligerent customers as of late.
Reaching out, Wiggins grabs Blaine's hand in a firm handshake.
I figured as much, but I just wanted to be sure.
You're looking good, Blaine. We should catch up over a pint sometime.
Overdue, my good man,
Mr. Blaine says with a wave as we leave him to his business, departing the custom house to continue our investigation elsewhere. We find a note stuck to the door at 221B Baker Street. Meet at 100 George Street. It takes Wiggins a moment.
Mr. Fortier's flat. Sounds like we missed something important.
Not wanting to waste time theorizing, we hail a hansom and make our way to the genesis of the investigation. We arrive to an open door.
In here, gents.
Following the distinctive voice of Dr. Watson, we join him and Sherlock Holmes in Mr. Fortier's painting studio, where Holmes stands before two paintings resting on easels. The one on the left, an intricate oil landscape. The creator, of course, escapes us, but the quality hints to someone of prominence. The other painting, of birch logs burning in a fireplace, looks quite rudimentary, perhaps a work of Mr. Fortier's assistant. Before we can ask, Holmes turns to us. "Now, gentlemen, I can see by the looks on your faces you're a bit perplexed as to why I've summoned you here." He smiles before continuing. "That can only mean you haven't solved the case, and I've got you again." Wiggins's feathers fluff.
"Well, now, hold on there, detective. We just may have a better idea of the crime than you gather."
Holmes gives us a wink and pats Wiggins on the shoulder. The contest between us is our fun, of course, but the matter at hand is all business. Allow me to break down the crime we have solved, and together we shall share the victory. We take a seat on a couple of stools as Holmes paces between us. This is perhaps the first case where a murder victim actually gave you an attestation, revealing not only the crime behind the murder, but the perpetrator as well. Of course, by now, you most surely realize that poor Mr. Fortier was not a victim of revenge or personal vendetta, but wrapped up in a scheme, a most unfortunate, unwilling participant, mind you, involving what will surely become one of London's most infamous art robberies, the theft of Raphael's St. George and the Dragon.
We gathered that's what all this was about, but I confess, Mr. Holmes, we're still a little grey on some of the details.
Mr. Holmes takes up a glass jar half filled with water and proceeds to swirl a dirty paintbrush within. After a moment the water clouds, and Holmes hands the jar to Wiggins. "Hang on to that for a bit, will you?" He then repeats the process with another jar, his piercing gaze transfixed on a point no one else in the room sees, his brain locked in a process of solving the impossible, a look we've seen many times. Let us start with the general facts of the moment. You need not have looked any further than the Times to find out that St. George has been stolen from the National Portrait Gallery. Had you visited the gallery itself, or Tarkwell underwriters, which we'll get to in a moment, you'd learn that Scotland Yard has every available man searching high and low for the missing painting of immense value. Under such an environment, a thief intent on moving the stolen goods would require it to be well concealed. And with the pressure of Scotland Yard in its entirety bearing down, we can speculate even the most daring of thieves would not wish to linger with such a high-profile item. Even more so if the thief enjoys status in London's world of art, in which case even more eyes would fall upon him. Knowing Fortier's specialty, the replication of famous works of art, we can speculate he would be a perfect accomplice in hiding just such a painting. Wiggins shakes his head.
"I just don't get it, Holmes. How does an artist, even the greatest artist at replicating famous works, help move a stolen painting?"
"Ah," Holmes hisses as he raises the jar of dirty water before him. "Have you forgotten the clues of the case already when you first found Mr. Fortier? Observe." Holmes hurls the water from the glass against the painting on the left. Standard, well-established oil paint. As you see, the water has no effect. Holmes rubs the wet area with his finger. Even with a light rubbing on a wet area, the oil resists all deformation. Of course, further pressure and effort would irrecoverably ruin the painting. And now, the other painting, if you will, Mr. Wiggins. After a second, Wiggins jumps to and tosses the contents of his jar on the second painting. In moments, the picture of the fireplace runs down the canvas, sending a smear of colour dripping to the floor, not unlike the rainbow trail Mr. Fortier left in the Thames. Watching the colours run for a moment, we notice an oddity. New colours appear beneath the original image. Our eyes widen. "Now you've got it, lads," Holmes exclaims as he takes a rag and wipes away at the painting. As if by magic, a second painting, a naked woman in a garden, comes into view. The whole purpose of Fortier's custom paints from Oxford Art Supply was to gain him the ability to paint a false image over the original painting that would neither be permanent nor damage the original. Stepping closer to examine the canvas, Wiggins looks to Holmes with a raised brow.
"But why all the fanfare? Why not just have any old bloke paint any old picture? Why pull Fortier in?"
Holmes steps towards the wall where the painting of the Thames doused with water hangs. He stops before it and turns to face us. "You assume the thief had access to the paint and tools necessary for the deception, of which he most certainly did not, or have the knowledge to produce them. But more than that, the best concealment is often that which lies right under one's nose. Perhaps a bit of ego came into play, but most certainly mere practicality, as the painting would be shipped by rail and not only inspected and approved by Scotland Yard itself, but insured against theft or damage by Tarkwell underwriters. The replication of a painting that is known and quickly identifiable, yet with no great monetary value, so that it should not receive extended scrutiny. This was the talent for which Fortier was perfectly matched. It's really quite ingenious.
So we've got the what, but we still don't have the how or why. If Fortier was part of the theft, why did they kill him? And why did he destroy the painting?
Holmes perks up. Destroy the painting, you say? Is that what happened?
It was his dying words, Mr. Holmes. Sous la Tamise, under the Thames. I'll not forget it till the day I die. After some consideration, I believe he threw the painting into the Thames and that it lies forever lost, or at least utterly ruined deep under its current.
With a grin, Holmes turns to the painting of the Thames on the wall. Perhaps you are right, gentlemen, but as we will soon see, at least one other party believe the painting still remains, so for the moment let us move on to the who and why. Turning to face us once again, Holmes inhales deeply and continues as if to reveal the whole of the crime in a single breath. Since there is nothing criminal in Mr. Fortier's history, we must speculate that he did not wish to engage in a criminal enterprise, but was instead coerced into participating. When I visited Scotland Yard, I was not surprised in the least to hear of Mr. Fortier's frantic report of his kidnapped niece, Eleanor Fortier. Learning that Mr. Fortier recanted his entire report shortly afterwards speaks volumes to a man fully intimidated and wholly fearful. I learned firsthand from young Eleanor that the kidnapping was a fictional cover for an illicit affair with a university professor. This would have thrown most detectives cold, but having gone to the university to speak with Mr. William Willard, I learned that Mr. Willard has been away from England for many weeks, far before any reports of a kidnapping. A false alibi, given with full expectation that the unbecoming nature of the affair would keep the ruse from being investigated. And this gentleman sets the stage for a young and naive accomplice, though most certainly not intent on killing her uncle, but rather in getting away with a large sum of money for her participation. Of this last fact I have no proof, but I'm sure of it, unless the young woman's attitude towards her uncle was so bitter as to force him into a criminal undertaking just for her own amusement. In the end, her true intent is quite inconsequential. Shaking his head, Wiggins crosses his arm before his chest.
Imagine a girl of her stature lashing out against her own blood like that. Youth today.
Indeed, Holmes responds as he paces in place, not taking more than 2 steps in any direction. Now that we have the means by which Fortier was coerced, we need only discover the mastermind behind the plot, the thief and murderer himself, to which I have alluded. Mr. Fortier already told you most directly the responsible party. Thinking for a moment, Wiggins shrugs.
The only possible person would be Mr. Silas Browning. It was the only other clue Mr. Fortier offered.
Exactly, old man. Holmes snaps his fingers, continuing with a heated step. Obviously, Mr. Browning was quite knowledgeable in the realm of art, and having known Mr. Fortier for some time, knew he would be the perfect candidate to conceal the painting. A visit to Mr. Browning's home address led me to a most enlightening conversation with a chimney sweep, who put a young woman of Eleanor's description at Mr. Browning's residence, not held captive, but instead enthusiastically plotting with him. Stepping before the painting on the easel, still dripping from the splashed water, Watson scratches his chin and struggles to get ahead of his old friend.
Hold on. So the niece and Mr. Browning tell Mr. Fortier he's got to conceal the painting, or else something horrible will happen to poor Eleanor. Mr. Fortier recanted his police report, so he believed it all, hook, line, and sinker. And why kill the poor chap? If Mr. Browning got the St. George, why the murder?
Elementary, my dear Watson. If one only spoke to the sweep employed by Mr. Browning, he would have recalled that Mr. Fortier called on Browning unexpectedly and caught the two together, eating gayfully. Infuriated by the deceptive manipulation, Mr. Fortier must have demanded more time and hatched his own scheme to thwart Mr. Browning. Holmes stops and points back to the wall, to the vandalized painting of the Thames. Here is the evidence that proves such deduction. A painting of the Thames soiled in a manner to reveal a false painting, if one should exist with Fortier's special paints. And had you visited a number of Fortier's recent clients, a list provided by a competitor painter, Oscar Babbage, upon investigating the homes of Baxter Defoe, Jerome Arliss, and Theona Gibbons, you would find a number of paintings, all of the Thames, similarly defaced. Wiggins nods.
Fortier told Browning he'd paint a picture of the Thames over the St. George, then, learning of the deception played out against him by his niece, never delivered the painting. After Browning killed Fortier, Browning went around to all Fortier's acquaintances, anyone he might have given the painting to, in a desperate attempt to locate it.
Grabbing Wiggins around one shoulder, Holmes exclaims with excitement, "Well done, lad! and turning to Tarkwell Underwriters, the insurance company procuring one Bernard Shaw for an art transportation, we see, in fact, a single painting of the Thames accounted for, The View of St. Paul's from the Thames, by Daniel Turner. The plot uncovered. Wiggins's face draws down.
It all adds up, Holmes, but it still doesn't explain the murder, nor does it give us the proof we need to send Mr. Browning to Lestrade.
Doesn't it, though? Holmes asks, clasping his hands behind the small of his back. I heard a most interesting story of Mr. Fortier's last moments by his young assistant, Edison Blake. Blake spoke of the murder bludgeoning Mr. Fortier over the head from behind, a heavy, small object of irregular shape, as Thomas Blood, the coroner, noted. The lad said he saw a flash of silver, which he mistook for a pistol, which in fact was the murder weapon. Not a firearm, but a small figurine kept at Mr. Browning's gallery under lock and key in a glass display.
Brilliant, Holmes, Dr. Watson chimes in with a gruff chuckle. But how do we know with certainty that Mr. Browning is the murderer himself? Could he not have had an accomplice?
Shaking his head, Holmes looks to his old friend with a furrowed brow. Unlikely. A man like Mr. Browning would wish to involve as few people as possible in such a high-value crime. Eleanor, Bernard, and Mr. Fortier likely already exceeded his comfort level in this regard. Beyond this, Mr. Browning was in the unique position of having keys to the flats of many of those he worked with, likely Mr. Fortier himself, as well as other clients supplied by Mr. Babbage, particularly the last of Babbage's list, Mrs. Fiona Gibbons, whose unfortunate end was no doubt met with the same figurine murder weapon used on Mr. Fortier. Possessing the murder weapon and key to Mrs. Gibbons' home, and lacking an alibi for her time of death, should be enough for the courts. Wiggins shakes his head in disbelief, struggling to smother a boyish grin of awe.
Outstanding, Holmes. You've seen every angle. I only wish you could have recovered the painting. Somehow I thought for sure Fortier was trying to give us a clue more than in a confession.
Ah, but don't you see it, lads? They were one and the same. Holmes takes up another glass jar of water and moves to the soiled painting of the Thames on the wall. Sous la Tamise, he shouts, then proceeds to hurl the liquid against the wall, hitting the painting of a vase and roses, a painting hanging directly under the Thames. Wiggins, my good man, I'd like you lads to personally deliver St. George and the Dragon back to the National Portrait Gallery with compliments of Sherlock Holmes.